Why Leonardo da Vinci was a scientist, not an artist. The original Renaissance man died some 500 years ago, but the nature of his genius continues to fascinate us, which is why, in today's video, we will be shedding light onto the heated debate as to why Leonardo da Vinci was a scientist and not an artist. Across the centuries, each generation has interpreted Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, finding him to be remarkably modern. At the 500th anniversary of his death, May 2, 2019, we can consider Leonardo's meaning in our era. Our fundamental nature as human beings has not changed in 500 years, but our environment has transformed at an extraordinary rate, along with our perspectives on his accomplishments and our own. His nature of genius. Leonardo is a genius and a potent symbol of the universal man because of the breadth of his interests in the arts, science, and technology, spanning disciplines from chemistry. He discovered acetone, to astronomy. He discovered the lumen cinereum of the moon, to math. He discovered the center of gravity of a pyramid, to working with plastics. Genius takes many forms, and in Leonardo's case, we recognize his limitations. He was defensive about his lack of formal education. He called himself homo sans a letter, a man without letters. He had trouble with basic arithmetic operations, and his Latin skills were weak. He surely would not have performed well at a modern school system, and his IQ might have been tested as low. We do not believe he can or should be diagnosed with any condition, such as autism spectrum disorder or attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. Many people wonder if there could be a genius like Leonardo today, or what a person of his disposition would do. Perhaps there cannot be another like him, because today's world requires tremendous specialization. Many of us are in fields that demand interdisciplinary thinking. But few scientists, physicians, poets, or politicians today are called geniuses, a unified vision of nature's laws. Leonardo's science was grounded in the Aristotelian world as shaped by 18 centuries of interpreters. He developed a system of what he called the four powers of nature: movement, weight, force, and percussion. Although he struggled to define these concepts, and many of the ideas are archaic, it is telling that he developed a coherent model for all natural phenomena, ranging from the macrocosm, e.g., geological forces that lead to the formation of rivers and oceans, to the microcosm, e.g., human anatomy. We believe he was excited about his conception of the four powers and how they informed his art and science. We are on a similar kind of path today, seeking the grand unification of the laws of physics as we study natural phenomena from subatomic particles to the history of the universe. Few of us extend this attempt at unification to the arts as well. Visualized knowledge. To Leonardo, vision is the noblest of the senses and of paramount importance, and his passion for vision was extreme. The eye is the window of the human body through which the soul views and enjoys the beauties of the world. Because of it, the soul is content in its human prison, and without it this human prison is its torment. He writes in his Paragon, Comparison of the Arts. He emphasized ways to visualize knowledge, and he pioneered anatomical illustration. To Leonardo, painting was a science, and the creative act of painting is useful to visualize the world. As an anatomist and physiologist, he decided at one point that the sense of vision is so important that it must be mediated by its own brain region, the imprensiva. See also has the meaning of paying attention, and Leonardo did this with exquisite patience. He would strike a dusty table and describe the pattern by which the dust settled again. He performed repeated dissections of the body, and when his observations conflicted with those of his authorities, he was sometimes able to liberate himself and pioneer original discoveries. Faith and experience. Leonardo was most comfortable relying on his senses as the basis of meaningful experience. He summarizes his attitude about the surety of science. To me it seems that those sciences are vain and full of error which are not born of experience, mother of all certainty, first-hand experience which in its origins or means or end has passed through one of the five senses. And if we doubt the certainty of everything which passes through the senses, how much more ought we to doubt things contrary to these senses, such as the existence of God or of the soul or similar things over which there is always dispute and contention? He writes in his treatise on painting. For Leonardo, this faith and experience was largely visual. In the 21st century, we understand we cannot derive all knowledge from sensory experience, and many as studying genomes or otherwise using computers have encountered the limits of empiricism. Confronted with today's world, no doubt Leonardo would have been brilliant at visualizing information. Interdisciplinary science. Leonardo's thinking was interdisciplinary. When he injected wax into the brain or into the heart to make casts of the inner workings of the body, he was borrowing the lost wax technique familiar to sculptors. When he studied friction and invented roller bearings and ball bearings, he reasoned that frictional resistance differs according to the nature of the surfaces in contact and increases in direct proportion to load, and he even estimated, for the first time, a coefficient of friction. But he went further to realize its relevance not just to machines, but to the movements of tendons over bones, to the creation of heat by the heart, and to the production of voice by the friction of air on the vocal cords. Creativity in science and art. Creativity is productivity marked by imagination. Creativity is as basic to art as to science. We can be creative as teachers, as students, as writers and readers. We can appreciate the many facets of Leonardo's creativity, and it can inspire us today. Leonardo combined science, art, and engineering in a unique way. In his time, scientia referred to knowledge while ars referred to manual proficiency. The modern distinction between the sciences and humanities, famously described by C.P. Snow, did not exist as it does today. Leonardo was well positioned as an artist to assume the mission of a scientist. For Leonardo, the artist's creative, noble purpose is to depict the natural world. The artist must understand the entire world as a scientist would. Fulfillment of human potential. Today, we can appreciate all that Leonardo accomplished, as well as his many failures, seeing someone who fulfilled his potential in a unique way. He was appreciated as an extraordinary artist in his own lifetime, and his admirers had a sense that his explorations of the worlds of science and engineering were exceptional. He has inspired generations for 500 years, with our appreciation growing in the past century as we have been able to interpret his writings. As ever-increasing access to information and technology shapes today's world, we as a society may reflect on Leonardo's values of creativity, curiosity, talent, and knowing how to see. We admire his values, and we may wonder how they fit in a contemporary society. I am not sure if he would have thrived. We can also wonder how his values could help each of us try to fulfill our own potential. From this point of view, millions of us are inspired by his life's journey. Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. If you're still looking for a Christmas gift for the science nerd in your life, consider Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, the outstanding biography from the same author who brought us Steve Jobs and Einstein, dissects the life of the complicated Renaissance artist with exquisite detail. We come to see Da Vinci as not only an inventor of musical instruments and early flying machines, but also an obsessive notebook keeper and vegetarian, who had trouble finishing many of the projects and paintings he started. Yet what is most thrilling is getting to know Da Vinci the scientist. Isaacson explains how loving science and applying the scientific method to observing the world was really what made Da Vinci a great artist and, Isaacson argues, a genius. Da Vinci was obsessed with observing and understanding phenomena in nature, from the proportions of the human body to how the muscles of the lips moved. He wanted to know about everything around him, in minute detail. Isaacson writes, he wondered about questions most people over the age of 10 no longer puzzle about. For instance, how the tongue of the woodpecker works. To learn about the world, Da Vinci blended his own observations with experimentation. Never formally schooled, he preferred to induce from experiments rather than deduce from theoretical principles, Isaacson explains. He recorded his observations, looked for patterns among them, and then tested those patterns through additional observation and experimentation. Da Vinci's emphasis on empirical observation also helped him improve his art. First, he was able to use what he learned from looking at nature to paint and draw. His studies of the body, animals, motion, shadow and light, perspective and proportion helped him better understand what he was seeing in front of him and render it in art more accurately and finely than anyone else of his time. Therefore, it can be said that Leonardo da Vinci was an extraordinary artist because he was an extraordinary scientist. With that, we come to the end of today's video. Don't forget to join in next time for more of such interesting content.